Alrighty, episode 7. So now we're going to start breaking down attachments, class setups, that kind of thing. Now, I don't really know how I'm going to structure this because the attachments in this game are really weird. They're very complicated, and well, so basically, I'm on this site here, True Game Data. Um, this site is awesome. Sadly, since Modern Warfare 2019 is so old, or rather that the people behind the site don't care about it anymore, the information for the guns in this game are not complete. Sometimes it's not accurate. So I think what I'll do is I'll walk you through how I set up like my primary class, and that'll kind of be a good starting point. So definitely use this site. This site tells you so much stuff that the game doesn't. The game, like, the attachments just straight up lie to you, like, most of the time. Like, they'll say they'll do something and they don't. They say they hurt something and it doesn't. And, like, this site is just so cool because this site basically looks at the raw game data, like the actual coding of the game, and the coding may be different from what the actual UI says. So that's why this stuff is the way it is. So hopefully that makes sense. So if you're trying to learn, yeah, I'll kind of walk you through how to get to here. So basically, like, you'll have to click on this part right here. I think it starts on Warzone, or I think it says pick your game or something here. So you're gonna want to go to Warzone Caldera, or excuse me, yeah, no, that's right, Warzone Caldera. Now here's the problem. Um, I think that the Warzone stats are actually different for certain guns. Like, they actually change the data values for the guns in Warzone, and so Warzone guns will function differently than in the multiplayer. But there's not a better option here, sadly. So Warzone Caldera is what you want to be using right here, and then you'll click that, and then you'll click comparison tool. So this is all we have to go on, sadly. I kind of wish, like, they would complete the game. I know it's not the, like, main game now and no one plays it, I guess, but I mean there's a lot of people that play it, including myself, obviously. But this is all we have to go off of. So, you can look at all the data values for these games, but we're playing Modern Warfare, so we're going to click Modern Warfare, and then you can filter the guns, like, to make it easier to find what you're looking for, or you can just search for the gun. But we're looking for the AK-47, so we're going to click assault rifle, and it's all alphabetized. So this is right here. It says MW there because there's an AK-47 in Cold War. If you didn't filter the game, it would show all of the guns for the 3 games, but we're looking for the AK-47, so you click it, and you go down here, and then it has the gun platform right here. So now you have access to all the attachments, and, like, here's all the values and whatnot, but we'll get into that in a second. Like I said, some of this stuff is just not complete. It's not tested because I I'm not 100% sure on this, but I'm pretty sure when they were first getting all these values and, like, all this information, they were hand testing all this stuff, because they didn't, like, have access to the actual code of the game or something. Um, I think I watched a video recently where they actually have gotten inside the game's code for Modern Warfare 2 so they can physically see the actual exact values, because when they test these things by hand, it's not accurate because, like, things are broken down into milliseconds and, like, frames, and, like some, hand testing can only get you so far. But it's kind of weird. This site actually used to measure a lot of these things we're going to talk about in milliseconds, and now it measures them in percentages. They just, like, a couple weeks ago, updated the whole site. It didn't used to look like this, and it changed a lot of things. But again, this is all we have to go off of, and it's pretty reliable for the most part. So let's get into it. We've got the AK-47. I think this is one of the best guns. Well, I mean, it is one of the best guns in hardcore because, again, we're playing hardcore kill confirmed. That's our mindset here. So basically, when you pick a gun in hardcore, I don't want to talk about everything all in one episode like this, but when you're picking a gun in hardcore, the cool thing about hardcore is that basically all the guns are viable. Obviously, some are going to compete better than others, but Typically, if a gun shoots slower, that means it's probably going to have a one-shot kill potential. And if a gun shoots really fast, like the MP7 or the ISO or the Fennec or the Scorpion, there's typically faster shooting guns are going to have like at least a two hit potential. But obviously overall, guns that kill in one bullet versus two are going to be better, because those guns also usually have a faster bullet velocity. But so the AK-47, just overall for all things considered, is just the best gun, I think. Obviously, a lot of noobs run the AS Val. Um, we'll talk about that another time. It's a really newbie gun, and it gets you easy kills if you suck at the game. Uh, but the only issue that gun has is that it kind of performs poorly at long range, like extremely long range. This gun, anywhere you shoot them at any range, you'll always get a one-shot kill every single time, unless you shoot through a surface. So let's get into the muzzles. Well, I'm sorry. Let's go over the base stats. So I can explain, because explaining all of this first will make the rest of the video easier. RPM is your rounds per minute. So the AK actually shoots fairly slowly, but again, that doesn't really matter when your gun kills in one shot. So firing a lot of shots is actually bad, obviously. So having a low rounds per minute is actually a good thing, because it kind of forces you to be more accurate, and it also helps with recoil and stuff, because the slower the rounds coming out, the less the gun is going to kick up, and then it'll be able to recenter before another shot comes out. So that's what rounds per minute means. This is the magazine capacity. If you change the magazine up here, it'll all the information will reflect down here once we're done. Reload time, pretty self-explanatory. It reloads. So reload time isn't the animation itself. So like when you hit reload, he does the whole animation. Well, your gun actually reloads faster than that. At least for most guns. I mean, there's not many guns that like don't do this. But so what I'm saying is that it's hard to tell on hardcore because there's no HUD. But if you reload a gun, even though the animation isn't done, the bullets are actually in the gun. So like, let's say we're reloading the AK-47. So when you reload the gun, he takes a magazine off his chest, off his like ammo carrier. Then he takes the one magazine that's already in the gun, and then he takes it out, and then he puts the new one in. Well, you can, and then you have to wait for him to put the other magazine away, and then he puts the gun like in firing position. You don't actually have to wait that whole time. He's done reloading. Actually, when you hear that click noise of the new magazine that he's putting in, that's actually when the bullets are in the gun. So I'm explaining this. Obviously, good players already know this. Like, it's called reload canceling. So obviously that's a huge skill. We can talk more about that later. But reload canceling is a big deal, because theoretically, maybe a gun has a reload, like the whole animation. Let's just say it takes like 5 seconds for it to complete, but the gun might actually reload the bullets into the gun with 3 seconds. So this is, you might be asking, well, why do they make the animation longer than the actual bullets are going into the gun? Well, that's all balancing. The animation team behind the game, they probably just want to make a cool animation that like fits the gun and whatnot. But then the people that are actually making the game and trying to balance all the guns to fit correctly, they're like, okay, well, this gun has this drawback, but we should probably make it reload a little bit faster so it's like actually useful. So that's why that happens. But let's continue. Aim down, ADS time. That's how fast that's how fast your gun is going to aim so this is kind of complicated. So if you're standing still, you hit the aim button, it'll take 267 milliseconds for your character to go from hip fire to fully aiming down sights. Now, this doesn't take into effect sprint to fire or tactical sprint to fire, but we'll get to that in a second. So that's what aim down sights is. That's when your character's not moving. Well, it's not when he's not moving. It's when you're not performing any other action other than having your gun at your hip. You have your gun at your hip, and you hit the aim button. That's how fast it'll take, or how long it'll take for him to get fully down the iron sights. Hip fire area. This is I'm not sure what value 13.2. I think that's millimeters. So like this is basically the radius degree. This is the degrees in which how big the again in hardcore you can't see this, but like if you have better hip fire accuracy, the reticle on your screen will actually be closer together, so your shots will be when you hit fire, they'll be so basically it's like a cone. So when you shoot a bullet, the bullet travels in a cone, so it'll shoot randomly within the cone. So if you tighten up the cone and make the cone smaller, that's when you have better hip fire accuracy. So the smaller this number, the better. The bigger it is, that means your bullets are going to be going everywhere, like with a sniper rifle or an LMG like that. Bullet velocity is a very important stat. This is how fast your bullets travel once you fire them. So the reason this is important is because if you have a gun with a slow bullet velocity, that means you're going to have to lead your targets at farther ranges. So like if you're using like a pistol, it might feel like your bullets are missing even though you're shooting somebody right on. Well, that's because the person you're shooting at, if they're moving, they're actually moving faster to the side than the bullet is traveling forward. So the higher your bullet velocity, the better, because that basically means that your bullet, it's going to feel more consistent. So like especially at longer ranges, like if bullet velocity is probably the most important stat in hardcore, especially because again, if you have the AK-47, which kills in one shot, you want to make sure that bullet hits exactly where you shoot it. Now you can get good at like leading your target and like predicting where they're going to move and stuff, but it's really not. Most of the attachments we're going to be running are going to help this, and they're going to help other things also. So really, 628 milliseconds is pretty fast, and for most engagements, you're not gonna be missing your shots like straight on. When you start like reaching across the entire map and trying to snipe people with the AK, yeah, you'll feel it. You'll feel it like in super slow motion. It would be like you pull the trigger, so it's like bang, and then you get the hit marker. So if they're really close, it's bang, but then the farther away, it's like bang. It's a little bit slower. So, and you might actually see the bullet in the game like actually drop. Like you'll be able to see it. So, bullet velocity is extremely important. 620, like really 600 milliseconds is where the gun is pretty good, and then anything below that is when you're really going to start like 500 and lower is when you're going to really start seeing the difference. Movement speed. So your movement speed is the speed in which you move just by pressing the stick in a direction. That's not when you're sprinting, that's not when you're tactical sprinting. That's just how fast your character just moves in general. So if you're walking basically, or I think technically they call it running. That's when you're just running, you're moving normally. So you move that fast per millisecond, or so like you'd move 4.71 meters every millisecond. Or excuse me, that's not. I'm sorry, that's meters per second. Sorry, your character will move 4.71 meters per second when he's just moving. Sprint to fire. So sprint to fire is how fast your character will have his gun in the firing position after he sprints. So when you press the stick in and your character's sprinting, when he's like actually, he's not running anymore, he's sprinting, and the gun isn't in the firing position. If you hit the fire button or stop moving and you try to get your gun up, it'll take 50 milliseconds for your character to be ready to fire. This stat is extremely important in hardcore because hardcore it's not all just about who can get the first shot off, but the faster you can get from, you're trying to pick up tags, you're trying to move around, and the faster you can get back into firing position, the better. Tactical sprint to fire is when you're tactical sprinting, and that's how long it'll take for your character to get into firing position. So now I mentioned this earlier when I was talking about aim down sight speed. So what this does, this value here is how fast your character is ready to fire. That's not how fast it takes for him to aim and be firing. So I'm not 100% sure how to explain this. So if you're tactical sprinting and you hit the aim button, it's not going to take 375 milliseconds for him to aim down the iron sights. It's going to take him 375 milliseconds to be ready to fire so that you can actually shoot bullets. And then it'll take him 267 milliseconds to actually aim down the iron sights. It's kind of like that. I think that might actually be faster if you're doing it while you're sprinting. But generally, let's just think of it this way. When you're tactical sprinting, it's going to take you 375 milliseconds to be able to shoot bullets, and then it'll take you another 267 milliseconds to aim down your iron sights. So that's the best way to explain it for the most part. Obviously, this is extremely important because you want to be moving around, picking up tags and that kind of thing. So aim down sight movement speed is how fast your character can move while he's aiming. So, obviously you're not going to be moving at 4.71 milliseconds anymore. You're going to be moving, or meters per second. You're going to be moving at 2.28 meters per second. So this is a pretty decent stat. It's more important in core modes because being able to move around quickly in a gunfight while you're actually like aiming and shooting is important because it throws off the enemy trying to shoot accurately. It's a pretty good stat overall though, because in hardcore, like I said in previous episodes, I don't remember which one, but I said, there's other ways to be quiet in this game instead of just running dead silence. I think it was the field upgrades episode. So like, if when you aim down sight, your character isn't silent, but he moves extremely quietly. Like you can hear the pitter patter if you listen very closely. Like you'll be able to hear the footsteps. But if you have a high aim down sight movement speed, it's like, hey, I can move pretty quickly while I'm also aiming. So I'm quiet and I'm also kind of fast. So usually I don't think there's ever a time where this value will match or be higher than this one. In fact, no, it doesn't. Sorry. There's never going to be a time where you can aim faster than you can just move regularly, but you can get it pretty fast. So that's why that stat's important, and that's what that does. Zoom, this is basically like how much the screen will zoom in when you aim. Obviously with iron sights, it'll zoom in a tiny bit. So if this number was just 1.0, that means that the screen wouldn't zoom in at all. It would just stay exactly how it is when you're not aiming. But it's 1.1 because when you aim, you'll notice the screen actually kind of zooms in a little bit, so it lets you be able to see the iron sights a little better. So obviously if you're running like an optic, like none of the reflex sights zooming in, like the GI mini reflex or the Cronin mini reflex, like none of those will zoom the screen in. But then you get like the VLK Scout optic or whatever it's called, like that one zooms in I think 3 times, so you'll get the screen will zoom in 3 times more. So obviously the higher the zoom, the more the screen's going to zoom in. So this one isn't as important to worry about because, again, since you're killing enemies in one shot in hardcore, we'll talk about reticles here in a bit, but reticles really aren't that important. But sprint speed, this is obviously how many meters per second you're going to be sprinting. So when we sprint, we no longer move at 4.71 meters per second. We move at 6.14. Tactical sprint, you move a little bit faster. So that's what those two mean. All right, so now that we've talked about those, let's actually start making the class. Okay, okay, so here's a good example right here. I mean, the flash guard is a completely useless attachment. Like, I don't even know why this is in the game. But you can see it says stats not tested. In the game, I believe so what it does is it basically takes your flash away. Like when you shoot a gun, it'll flash and it'll kind of obscure your vision a little bit. I think well, obviously this makes it to where your gun doesn't flash anymore. And I think it might reduce the amount of barrel smoke that comes out, but that's kind of irrelevant. But the downside is that it reduces your bullet velocity, and I think your aim down sight speed, I'm pretty sure. But this attachment is like actually like completely useless. Like never use this thing. This is the dumbest attachment in the whole game probably. So like again, I it's like all the other episodes. I just want to delete from your mind a bunch of these attachments that we just don't even have to worry about. Trust me, there's never a reason to run this thing. It actually makes your gun worse because it lowers your bullet velocity, and we were talking about how important that is. So just completely that attachment on any gun is terrible. And again, all these attachments function a little bit differently on every single gun. Like literally every attachment does something different. Like even like the muzzle brake, it'll function completely different on a marksman rifle or an SMG or something. So that's why this sight is so useful, because you might be thinking like, oh, I like the compensator, it works really well on this gun, I'll just put it on all the guns. Well, it might actually do different things on a different gun. So we can talk about that a little later though. So the muzzle brake here, so in the game it says it improves your recoil stabilization and I I think there's another thing it improves, but it makes the cons of it is that it increases your aiming stability, or like makes it worse, and it makes your aim down sight speed worse. As you can see, it actually the game. This is what I was talking about when I said the game lies to you. It says it makes your aiming stability worse. So your aiming stability, what that is when you're aiming the gun, that's how much the gun is going to shake and move from side to side. So it's not going to be completely accurate. Um, what sway speed, and we're going to be talking about a lot of different stats here. So what sway speed is, it's not how big the magnitude is of how much your gun is going to be swaying, it's how fast it's going to be swaying. So like the gun might, like if you just hit the aim button and hold it and you just let the character kind of swivel around with the aim, like he might be doing it really quickly, like the sway might be really quick, like he's moving pretty quickly with the aim, but he's not actually moving very off target. So sway speed is just how fast he does it. Sway, I think it's swaying magnitude or something they call it on this site. Sway magnitude is how far away from the center of the aim he'll be swaying from. So it, again, the game lies to you. It says it makes your aiming stability worse, but it actually makes it the sway speed better. So, and again, another thing I have to explain here is the game on this site, it doesn't, for some of these it calculates the sway magnitude, and then sometimes it doesn't. And I don't know if that's because there actually is not any coded sway magnitude difference, or if that's because they didn't test it. There's no way for me to know that, but as far as we know, according to this, the game lies to you. It actually just makes your sway speed better. We don't know about the sway magnitude. So maybe it makes the gun sway, like, so here, look at the mouse. So like I should have been doing this when I was explaining it. So the sway speed is now actually a little bit slower. Like originally it might be like this, and now it's like this. So he, when it says the aiming stability is worse, it might, like, let's pretend this is a circle. So I'm aiming here. So he might be aiming like this now, and if the aiming stability was worse, he'd be aiming like this now. Okay? Hopefully that explains it. And it is correct. It does increase your aim down sight time. So let's actually equip this. Let's pretend like we're equipping this, and let's go down here. So you can see it calculated the aim down sight time. So it's worse now. It's only a couple milliseconds. And again, like I said before, it used to tell you the actual millisecond value. But you can get a rough idea of how much 3% is. 3% is not very much. As you can see, it's 200. You'll aim in 275 milliseconds now, and before I think it was like 267 or something like that. Yeah, so it was only like what, 8 milliseconds. You're not going to be able to detect that in the game. Like you won't see a difference because you're talking about like one frame, maybe like a couple frames. So, but the problem is that you remember I said that this attachment is supposed to help your recoil stabilization. And what recoil stabilization is supposed to be, it's supposed to be your recoil that's horizontal. So recoil compensation, well, I mean, in the game it says recoil compensation and then recoil stabilization. Recoil compensation is your vertical recoil. That's your up and down recoil. Horizontal recoil, that's recoil stabilization. That's how much it's from side to side. So it says it's supposed to improve your recoil stabilization, which would be your horizontal, but it doesn't, according to the site. So again, the game just lies to you. So the muzzle brake is a completely useless attachment on most guns. Actually, I used to run this attachment because your vertical recoil is pretty easy to compensate for yourself, because you can just hold down on the right stick a little bit. From going from up and down, you just hold down on it a little bit and it'll be fine. It's when the shots start veering to the side that it makes it kind of hard. But yeah, no, this attachment is like actually completely worthless. Like having a little bit less sway speed is irrelevant. For worse aim down sight time. So yeah, just this attachment on the AK is terrible. Now this attachment on another gun might make the sway speed -2% and add 4% aim down sight time. That's not, I don't know that, but that's just how it is on this gun. The tactical suppressor is completely stupid. Like never on any gun. Like this is the same as the flash guard. The tactical suppressor just basically suppresses your gun, but suppressing your gun in this game is actually worthless, because you can still hear somebody shooting a suppressor. So in the old Call of Duties, a suppressor would take you off the minimap. So in the old games, if you don't know, when you shot your gun, you would show up as a red dot on the minimap. Obviously, in hardcore, that's less of a problem, but in regular modes, you would show up as a red dot on the screen. And the suppressor, I mean, that doesn't happen in this game. You shoot a gun with a minimap on, you don't show up as a red dot. So the suppressor just does nothing, basically. Again, you can still hear suppressor. I mean, the only benefit a suppressor is really going to give you is, again, it kind of acts like a muzzle or a flash guard. It doesn't make your gun flash anymore, but the smoke is a little bit worse, I think. But again, that's kind of irrelevant. The tactical suppressor is just stupid. It literally, all it does is increase your aim down sight time. So it makes your aim down sight time for what? Just to make your gun a little quieter. You might think like, oh, well, that'll make it harder for enemies to hear me and like find me. No, the maps are too small, and like, trust me, a good player like me is going to be able to hear your suppressed shot just fine. Never, ever, ever run a suppressor like this one. It's terrible on every single gun. All right, the compensator is like the best attachment in the entire game. Like, for almost every single gun, it is just a god tier attachment. So for example, on the AK-47, all it does is it increases our aim down sight time by 1.5%. So we had 3% here and 3% here. This gun improves our recoil, vertical and horizontal, by 27%. So you remember how I said the muzzle brake was supposed to help your recoil stabilization, which was your horizontal recoil? Well, the compensator says it helps your recoil compensation, or what, I forget what it says in the game. It's recoil compensation, I'm pretty sure. So it literally does both, and it does it a lot. And the other thing it says it harms in the game, it says it harms your aim down sight time and your aiming stability. But again, it lies to you and says it actually makes it better, just like the muzzle brake. So you get a little bit better aiming stability, and you get a ton of vertical recoil and horizontal recoil control for just like barely anything on aim down sight. So like you can see, we equipped it. It doesn't even really so it went up by 3 milliseconds. For some reason, it's not showing up as red. So we have 271 milliseconds when we equip that. And then when we unequip it, it's 4 milliseconds. You're literally never going to be able to feel that difference. So the compensator is literally all benefit for no drawback at all. Like, it's god tier. It's actually the attachment I run on this class, because there's just no reason not to run it. Now let me talk about mindset here. Typically, in all games I play and like whatnot, I don't like to run attachments that make it easier to shoot the gun, like recoil control, that kind of thing, because really you should be able to compensate the recoil yourself. You just need to get good at the game, and because you're wasting an attachment basically making the game easier for you, and you don't want that. We've talked about that in other episodes. But I can't not run this thing. It's too good. It does nothing to harm you and just makes the gun better. So we'll talk about why I run this one and why the other ones I don't run, or other attachments in the other parts. The lightweight suppressor is just like the tactical suppressor, except it's even freaking worse. There's no reason to ever run the tactical suppressor or the lightweight suppressor. I'm talking on any gun. There's no reason. All it does is the same thing. It suppresses your fire. But again, I can still hear you. This one is even worse because it decreases your range, which isn't really important in hardcore, but in other modes, obviously, like regular modes, that's pretty bad. But here's the big one. It decreases your bullet velocity by 30%. That is a ton. So you get no benefit, and you get less range and bullet velocity. So look at that. 400. Remember I said anything under 500 is worse? Well, we just lost like almost 200 milliseconds worth of bullet velocity. So it's 440 right now. So let's take it off. It was 600. Yeah, so we're almost 200 milliseconds worse in bullet velocity. You're going to feel that difference really, really bad. Like, never run that attachment. It is complete dog shit. The bayonet, obviously you don't want to be running this. It's cool, but it's completely worthless, especially in hardcore where everything's a one-shot kill. You're not going to want to be running an attachment that just makes it to where you can melee somebody. This is basically the breacher device on every other gun. It's just it's a one-hit melee kill. I don't know why they decided to make a bayonet for the AK, but it's kind of neat. But obviously, never run this. It's terrible. I think it's supposed to make your aim down sight worse or something, whatever it says in the game. But you see, it says stats not tested because you shouldn't run this. It's terrible. No one's gonna run it anyway. Now, okay, the monolithic suppressor is actually a fairly decent attachment. I know I was just saying, oh, lightweight suppressor in tactical is so bad. So you're not running the monolithic suppressor for the suppression effect. That's honestly, in this regard, it's just a tiny little bonus. So the big reason you want to be running the monolithic suppressor is for this right here, the bullet velocity. It doesn't even tell you it does this in the game. All it says in the game is it increases your damage range and it suppresses your fire. It doesn't say anything about the bullet velocity. Again, same with the lightweight suppressor. It doesn't say anything about the bullet velocity. Or maybe it does. I can't remember with this one. But for a fact, I know this one does not say it increases your bullet velocity, but it does by 20%. That's a huge increase. Now, the downside is that it's a pretty considerable aim down sight time increase. The range is irrelevant. We're not really worried about that because, again, in core modes, yeah, it's pretty good. But in hardcore, you don't really need it. So let's equip that. So, okay, we go to 291 milliseconds with aim down sight. Let's see what it was. So it was 267. You're going to be able to feel that difference. It'll be a little bit slower. You'll feel that. And then let's see our bullet velocity. So our bullet velocity is 628 milliseconds, or meters per second. Oh, sorry, I'm hitting the wrong buttons. So we're going to equip that. It goes all the way up to 754 meters per second. So like the big advantage with this obviously is if you're trying to shoot people from across the map, you're not going to feel that delay anymore. Or if you're trying to shoot a UAV out of the air, you're going to be able to basically aim straight on the UAV and your bullets are going to hit. I actually used to run the monolithic suppressor for that reason, for just the better hit consistency, but I actually stopped running it when I found out how good the compensator was, for one, but also I thought it was actually making me a worse player because not only was it slowing me down in my aim down sight speed, I honestly, because the main benefit for me personally was being able to shoot UAVs a little more consistently, but I just got better at the game and just got more accurate. And really, all you need is like 3 or 4 shots with an AK with FMJ to take down a UAV. So it's not really that important. And being able to shoot enemies from across the map a little bit easier. I mean, like, I try to do that, right? If I'm playing, let's just say backlot, you have the construction building and then you have the burning building that's right across the map from it. I mean, that's a pretty considerable distance, right? You'll kind of, at that distance, you'll kind of feel the difference, like the delay. Like if you're trying to shoot somebody and they're moving, like, yeah, you're not going to be able to aim on them perfectly, but for the most part, like you can lead that target pretty well with 628 meters per second. So really, the standard bullet velocity for the AK is just good enough to where you really don't need to worry about it. Most of the maps aren't going to be like long enough for you to even have to shoot anything farther than that, so that's why I switched.